And hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren Jaime, and if you're asking the question, what is this show all about? Well, we take a look at a lot of the inequities that people face. We promote civic engagement. We give you multiple points of view, and we have some great and informative guests. So we encourage you to stay with us because the Social Justice Forum begins right now. And welcome back to the show. For largely more than a decade, decisions that have been handed down by the United States Supreme Court were largely in step with the American public opinion on major policy issues as the court's makeup grew more conservative. Now, abruptly, that's no longer the case. The court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson has garnered all the recent attention by reversing a 50-year precedent and eliminating the constitutional right to an abortion, despite the fact that a majority of Americans support abortion rights. It's better known as the recalling of Roe versus, or the overturning, I should say, of Roe versus Wade. And here now joining us to share a little bit more about that and then some, we've got the founding partner at the Boyd Law Group, Patrick J. Boyd. And Patrick, glad to have you with us.
My pleasure to be here.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this here. First of all, let's just go on the basis of what we've seen happen. A lot of people were surprised because it seemed to be leaked out for the first time, something from the Supreme Court, that Roe v. Wade would be overturned, and it happened. And yet and still, a lot of surprise and a lot of backlash from you from the legal perspective. What's it been like for you in hearing and talking and dealing with this Roe v. Wade decision, the overturning?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing, which is interesting and surprising and unique, which you mentioned for us as lawyers, is just the fact that there was this leak, right? The Supreme Court is hallowed chambers of our justice system with magnificent minds working on the finest of legal precedents and hoping to collaborate in their work confidentially, because quite frankly, as you're working to develop an opinion, you may change your opinion from time to time. And in this case, instead of that freedom of exchange of information happening without a leak, we got a leak of a decision, which scared a lot of people that Roe would be overturned. And I think after the leak, there was a lot of sentiment that perhaps it was just a drafted opinion in process, and perhaps the opinion would change, and there would be some. Perhaps it was partially hopes and partially expectations that the actual final opinion would be different. But sure enough, the final opinion was issued and seemed to be very much consistent with that earlier draft that we saw, and overturned more than 50 years of precedent, which acknowledged the constitutional right to an abortion. So an insight into the politics and the way the court works that is somewhat disappointing, I suppose. And then obviously a groundbreaking decision for the court as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a decision that really started. People ask, where did this whole overturning start? And from what I understand, it was a local case in Mississippi.
That's right. The state of Mississippi, presumably with the understanding, and different states have been passing legislation that's been overturned or overruled by courts for quite some time, right? In other ways impacting abortion rights, requiring parental consent, for example, or having a waiting period mandated, or these kind of other things. This Mississippi law was implementing a further restriction on a right to choose. So Roe v. Wade upholds the second trimester, the end of the second trimester, as that fundamental constitutional right for an abortion. Mississippi was trying to roll back that timeline to 15 weeks, and that was the law at issue and brought to the court. The interesting part, or at least with the decision as well, is that the court really would have had three options. They could have stuck to precedent and said this Mississippi ruling is restricting the constitutional right to an abortion. 15 weeks is not enough time, and thrown it out on that basis. That would have just been sticking with 50 years precedent. They could have then also gone with the option that was championed by Chief Justice Roberts, but not endorsed, which is to say, well, we're going to restrict abortion rights a bit further, and we're going to honor this Mississippi 15 weeks, right? So a shorter amount of time for women to have the right to choose in Mississippi. But the court didn't choose to do either of those. Instead, the court decided to say, we reject the notion under the Constitution of these United States that there is a fundamental right to choose, and we're going to throw out Roe v. Wade in full, which theoretically sets up the scenario where certain states could decide to pass laws restricting abortion rights at day one.
So for New Yorkers, and particularly New York women, give me a little insight as to how this is actually going to affect New York women. What does this actually mean?
Well, the good part of the structure of our government, and the part that the court was really talking about, was the notion that different states and elected officials in different states can make the laws that they wish to make to support the citizens of their states. And so in New York, as with multiple other states, even in anticipation of this ruling, there was a decision to uphold the right to choose, the right to have an abortion, and indeed funding set up to make sure that women in states where they might lose that right can be allowed to come to New York as a place to recognize that right to choose if they're not allowed to in their home state. And I think the governor funded certainly millions, I think something like $30 million to make sure that that right was championed here in New York, and that women, 35 million was set aside to make sure that there was a fund to provide for the influx of patients who wanted to have abortions and couldn't potentially in their home state, and security grants also for the clinics, that is the clinics that were going to be administering the abortions, to make sure that they felt comfortable continuing to provide that service to women. And that's consistent, at least, with the general citizenship of the state of New York. The right to choose has been consistently advocated for and endorsed in the state. So the governor was doing what her citizens wanted her to do, presumably, in doing that. And that's happened at this point, probably close to half of the states of these United States. Some trigger law went into effect, making sure that though the Constitution does not insist upon the right to choose, individual states will allow for that right to choose. So women in those states are not really in much different of a position than they were preceding the ruling of the court.
How much do you anticipate litigation coming on this part from New York, given the fact that New York has taken a strong opposite to what the overturning of Roe v. Wade, saying that we would be, quote unquote, a sanctuary city, a safe state for women? How much can we expect litigation to come from both inside and outside?
Well, I think in New York proper, because there at least appears to be such a political lean to the left on this particular right, at least, that is the right to choose. I think most of the funds and work is going to be put into place just to make sure that that right to choose is exercised, supported, and that money is spent to make sure we provide the safe right to choose for women in the state and women coming from outside of the state. The very interesting trend as to litigation and quite frankly, the operation of government is what's happening in other states. And just as an example, yesterday on the ballot in Kansas was a law that would have allowed the legislators to pass regulations restricting a woman's right to choose. Kansas is considered, at least by some, to be a very conservative state. So the thought was that legislation would have traction, and that state would, as a result, pass some meaningful restrictions on the right to choose. And notwithstanding that anticipation, if you will, it was on the ballot. I think just this morning we received some pretty significant feedback that ballot measure lost. That is, that the citizens of the state of Kansas came forward and voted pretty substantially and significantly, and somewhat surprisingly to some, to continue to allow the right to choose to exist in Kansas, and not to give the legislators power to meaningfully restrict the right to abortion in that state. So I think there'll be a lot of those legislative initiatives, if you will, in different states, and certainly some froth in the political process as a result, as different states and different citizens vote on how they feel on this subject.
Yeah, I want to take time and move from one subject to another for a second. We want to talk about Kennedy versus Bremerton, and for people who aren't familiar, this is particularly that deals with prayer in schools. A ruling was made with regards to prayer in schools, where prayer is allowed in schools. Now, while this ruling has come forward, there's still a lot of questions as to how this is all going to play out and what this actually means in terms of legality in certain areas. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a little gray here in Kennedy versus Bremen. There's a decision that's been made, but I think on the wider scope, a lot of people are still waiting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's a fascinating trend that's been happening for some time now. Honestly, the as the court has gotten more and more conservative, right now we have a 6-3 conservative court. There have been a flurry of decisions taking further steps to endorse and somewhat support the possibility of religious expression and prayer. In Bremerton, there was a high school coach. He was I believe, he's a former military member and a person who found religion significantly helping him in his early years right after high school. He became a coach and found that being a coach for students was very much his calling, something he was very grateful for. As a result of that, he would, during the course of football games, particularly at the end of games, go to the 50-yard line and take a knee in thanks for the opportunity to coach the young men. Not necessarily if they won or lost, by the way, but just in thanks of the opportunity to do what he was doing with the students. The funny part is that apparently he was doing that for several years without anything coming up. Nobody regulated it. Nobody chose to do anything. And at one point in time, a couple of years later, a competing team came out and saw this prayer, and the coach from that team called this coach's school and said, "What a great thing! I didn't realize that we could pray on the field." And some of my players came out there and prayed as well. At which point the school found out and got very concerned and started to try to restrict Mr. Bremerton's right to pray. He filed a claim as a result. The school was trying to restrict his constitutional rights, and the court was challenged with the notion of determining whether or not allowing prayer in a public school, right, constituted the government's endorsement of that prayer. That is, if the public school is allowing people to pray, does that mean the public school is endorsing prayer and endorsing faith, and as a result, bridging constitutional rights of people who don't have that same faith or don't have faith at all, if you will. And so what the court said was, in this particular case, at the end of an extracurricular activity, where the participation in prayer is purely voluntary, students and players were not required to pray. They were not assigned to pray. They were not punished if they didn't pray. But at this extracurricular activity, after its conclusion, if that coach chose to pray and other people chose to pray, then the government should not restrict that ability to pray. That ability to pray is a fundamental constitutional right that should be endorsed by the court. So it's a very complicated decision in the sense that decisions are different if that prayer happens within the school. Certainly decisions are different if people are required to participate in the prayer. But it is going to be an interesting interplay as to where religion finds itself in public schools these days. And this decision has raised a lot of eyebrows and changed some things.
Yeah. And so as we talk about raising eyebrows, a lot of eyebrows were raised by this decision, but there's still a lot of gray in terms of that. So walk us through a little bit more about the gray and how this is going to actually play out in schools across perhaps the tri-state area.
Yeah, I think it's really going to depend fundamentally upon each instance, right? Is the leader, the teacher, the coach forcing or encouraging in an unpleasant or unfair way the students or the makeup of the school to engage in prayer? If that's happening, then the government is establishing religion, and that's prohibited. If the coach or the student or the teacher is voluntarily engaging in prayer, not choosing to enlist anybody else, and engaging in prayer is not making it appear that the school, which must be neutral and is government funded, right? If they're not making it seem like the school supports the prayer, then arguably that right to prayer should be recognized and embraced. or at least left alone. You should be allowed to have your quiet prayer or meditation. At this point, you certainly can't be prohibited from giving thanks when you open your lunch bag, right?
Right.
Even in school. And now we know that you can't be forbidden from taking a knee at the end of a football game. But when in other places you can pray and not pray, and with whom you can pray and who you can encourage to pray or not, these are complicated things. Some of the objectors made a fair point. If this coach is engaging in prayer and players feel that they better pray with him, or they're not going to get a chance to be the starting quarterback or wide receiver, perhaps that is a risk that was being run. But the court felt that the importance of allowing prayer was greater than that risk in this particular case. But I think you're right. I think there are going to be a lot of individual cases where the facts and circumstances are going to be scrutinized, and we'll have some more decisions to talk about.
Yeah. Talk about decisions. I want to take time to talk a little bit about employment, some arbitration cases that you're taking a look at, and some employment cases that we're taking a look at nationwide that have also local impact. Give us a couple.
Yeah, so two of the decisions that have come out and had some meaningful impact are decisions that relate. I'll start with the arbitration decision first. As people may know, this is the Morgan case. As people may know, a lot of employees sit down and they don't even know what they're signing, but when they start work, they sign a document that mandates that if they have a dispute with their employer, they must arbitrate that dispute. In the Morgan case, the issue was that the employer had fought the employee for quite some time without compelling arbitration. That is, they had not forced the employee to arbitrate the case right away. And the question was, well, can the employer just wait forever and still have a right to arbitrate the case? That is, can you fight with your employee for a while, and then all of a sudden can they say, wait a second, Patrick, there's an arbitration clause, you have to arbitrate? And what the court said is no, the employer doesn't have the right to sit forever waiting to enforce their arbitration agreement. If they want to mandate private non-jury arbitration, they have to act quickly, or they're going to lose that opportunity. And this is, Daren, a meaningful erosion of something that a lot of employment lawyers, maybe a lot of lawyers overall, don't love. We operate in this country with the embrace and the understanding that a jury right is a fundamental right. And the idea that jury right can be removed by arbitration provisions where you just get one paid person and a private arbitration is not something a lot of people love. And the courts are slowly but surely eroding that mandated arbitration, making employment disputes a little bit more public, a little bit more open. And I think a lot of people think that's a good thing.
So for us, when we take a look at these cases, I think for the average person, they say, how does this actually impact me? How long does it take from the time a decision is made to actually seeing it boots on the ground?
That's a great question without an easy answer, right? I think it depends on the court, it depends on the case, it depends on the framework. I think that the thing that a listener can think about and embrace, I hope embrace, is that employment law is changing. It is changing predominantly in favor of added rights for employees, added public opportunities to voice their grievances, and added rights to collectively bargain, like in the unions that you see forming in Amazon and Starbucks. So worker rights are getting to be greater. The Great Resignation is demonstrative of the fact that people are expecting that to happen, or they're not going to stay at their jobs. And overall, I hope that's going to lead to a trend of people having better selective processes in choosing the job they want, and better rights if the job they want is not fair to them.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, we got to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for taking the time and joining us and sharing about these cases: Roe versus Wade, prayer in school, arbitration, employment, things that are all germane to what a lot of people are dealing with right now. Of course, we got to bring you back so that we continue to discuss this a little bit more and break some more things down in depth. Patrick Boyd, our guest, and Patrick, thank you.
My pleasure.
All righty. Well, I want you to stay tuned because guess what? We have more Social Justice Forum continuing. Don't go anywhere. We're coming back right after this. Welcome back to the show. More than 45,000 New Yorkers are currently living in city shelters, and thousands more remain unsheltered. Urban Pathways serves as the first point of contact for many homeless in New York City. The organization ensures homeless and at risk New Yorkers have the housing services and support that they need so that they can become self sufficient. We were recently joined by the Director of Policy at Urban Pathways, Nicole McVinua, and she shared a little bit more about the organization.
Thank you so much for having me.
And when we talk about the population, the homeless, the work that you do really reaches people right at that very beginning point. Share with us a little bit about your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So Urban Pathways is a nonprofit homeless services and supportive housing provider. We have over 20 programs throughout New York City, and we serve approximately 3,900 single adults every year. And our main focus is really serving people who are experiencing chronic street homelessness. So those folks who have been on the street for over a year or more, they might have sort of been in and out of the shelter system or just not really found the service that's right for them. And we also have a focus on serving people who are living with mental illnesses. And at Urban Pathways, oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Good.
I was going to say, we also offer, like you alluded to, a full continuum of services, which I think is really unique. So people can come in through street outreach, they can go to transitional housing, and then they can receive keys to their very own apartment, all under the Urban Pathways umbrella.
Give me a little bit of insight into this here, because in addition to the work that you do as being that first site, that first help at the inception for people who are homeless, I know that you also spend a lot of time with outreach teams that are actually going out with boots on the ground, hitting the ground, trying to help and deal. Talk to me about the work of the outreach.
Yeah, absolutely. So the outreach teams are really the first point of contact for folks who are living on the street or in transit hubs. So we have street outreach teams in the Port Authority bus terminal and both of the major New York City airports. We also do outreach in the Flatiron District and parts of Midtown Manhattan. And so outreach is really about relationship building. It's gaining the trust of individuals who are on the street, trying to meet some of their basic needs, and then finding the service that's right for them to get them indoors.
And you talked about building relationships. That's very critical. But when we're dealing with the homeless population, sometimes trust is a huge issue. Give us a little bit about what it takes and what you've been able to do in order to build that trust, but not just be able to build that trust, but to be able to help them to get across the finish line in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can take time, right? And so sometimes I know members of the community may see folks repeatedly on their street corner and they wonder, is that person receiving any type of service? But our street outreach, they don't rush people, right? They really want them to come in when they're ready, and they offer them assistance on the street as best they can until they're ready and they build that trust. And so one of the greatest tools that we have is our drop-in center, which is what it sounds like. You can drop in, get a meal, get a shower. You're not sort of tied to stay there, so people can come and go as they please. And then once they feel comfortable, they can stay longer and get a case manager and get assistance accessing their benefits and searching for housing. So that's been one of the best tools that we've had to sort of draw people in and give them a different option than going through the central intake system in the city shelters, which can be a really long and intimidating process.
Yeah, and it's a lot of red tape for a lot of people. I think that when you talk about this process of trying to deal, you hear that from so many people who deal with demand, there's so much bureaucracy and red tape, and waiting and delays, and things like that. But you do a good job of also helping in the area of permanent and supportive housing. Give us a little insight into the work that's being done there, because a lot of those that are coming through as your clients, this is their primary need.
Yes, absolutely. And so, we know that the solution to homelessness is housing at the end of the day. And so supportive housing is a wonderful tool to getting people housed who may have some challenges living independently, either because of their mental health or because of a physical disability. But supportive housing provides people with an independent living environment. They get keys to their own apartment. They're typically studio apartments. They have their own kitchen. They have their own bathroom. They have their own private space. But they have those support services ready on site at our congregate supportive housing, or we have some scattered site apartments where we actually rent apartments in the community, and the services come to them. So they have a case manager, they have a nurse accessible to them, they have social services staff that can help them to stay on track and manage their appointments and get connected to all of the sort of wraparound services that will support them to live a fully independent life.
And so you also have an employment program, the Upwards Employment Program. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we have an employment program that helps people with, kind of the whole process of getting a job. So job readiness, preparing their resumes, applying for educational or vocational training, if that's of interest to them, and then actually helping them with the job search, going on the interviews, getting that job, and then keeping that job. So they follow up with them to make sure that they're able to retain the position. We also have internship programs. Some of our clients can actually intern with us at Urban Pathways, working in another program site. So that's also a great opportunity for folks who are looking to get back into the workforce.
Yeah, and so for yourself, talk to me about the impact that you feel that the organization is making within the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we are certainly making an impact with the services that we're providing. I think we've been a really trusted service provider in the community. We've been around since 1975 doing this work. And, we've really been innovative as well into creating new programming to meet the needs of our clients as they arise. But the other piece of the work that we're doing, and that's kind of where my role comes in as the director of policy, is to advocate for policies that will make it easier for people to access permanent affordable housing, to move on from homelessness more quickly, and also to really get our consumers, the people that we serve, involved in that advocacy work, so that their voices can be heard and they can feel empowered to impact these systems that have affected their lives.
And as far as challenges are concerned, I know that, there's a lot of challenges out there, particularly dealing with this underserved and vulnerable population. For yourself, looking at the work that you do, what would you identify as some of the challenges that you're currently facing today?
We're certainly facing a number of challenges. One of those is staffing at our program sites. Just like so many other industries around the city and across the country, keeping our program staffed has been a real challenge, which is why we're part of the Just Pay campaign, which is a campaign to essentially end government sanctioned poverty wages that are currently provided in our contracts. So all of our programs are contracted by New York City, by New York State government entities. And so they really set the rates of pay for our staff. And, we think that the low pay has unfortunately created a lot of turnover within our organization. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing right now as an organization and as a sector as a whole.
Yeah. And about the summer months, we know we were just talking on another platform about the warm weather and the kind of challenges that it poses, but talk to me about the summer and how did things work out for you during this time of year?
Yeah, the summer is certainly a big challenge. I think that sometimes there's both hesitancy to come inside because the weather is a little bit nicer out, and people feel that they can stay outside. But certainly in this heat wave, it's extremely dangerous conditions to be outdoors. So I know our street outreach teams are working really hard to bring water to folks, make sure that people are staying safe and hydrated, and going to cooling centers to cool off, and really, trying to get people in the door of our drop-in centers, and also our safe haven programs, which sort of have a direct pathway of accessing a bed right through a street outreach team.
Yeah. And so looking forward to the future, what can we expect?
Certainly that we are going to continue growing and innovating. We know that our services work, and we want to continue to provide them and open new services, access to permanent affordable housing, as the solution to homelessness for as many people as possible. And we're also going to keep advocating to make sure that our programs are stable, and also that it's easier for people to cut through a lot of that red tape and get inside as fast as they can.
Yeah, I know the red tape is hard. Talk to us about that for a second, because I think we use that word because we know it so well. But give us a little insight as to some of that red tape that sometimes people are facing. And, you're able to, in some ways, to really cut down on some of that by the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, some of the challenges that we're facing right now are with city FEPS vouchers. So this is a housing subsidy program that's funded by the city, and we have folks who maybe don't need or desire to go into supportive housing and just want to go right into affordable housing right in the community. And so these vouchers provide a way to do that by subsidizing the rent, but they're very hard to use. It sometimes takes a very long time to go through the process. The housing packet gets sort of sent back and forth between the caseworker and the city to HRA, that gets bounced back and forth a lot of different times. There's not always a clear point of contact. So if the person has a question or wants to say, hey, where is my application in this process? It's sometimes hard for them to find that information. And then there can be delays. So, if I find an apartment, it has to go through an inspection process, and the housing packet has to be reviewed by the city, and sometimes the landlord might not be able to hold that apartment for very long, and so folks lose out in that way. So we've been working with a coalition called the Homes Can't Wait Coalition to really address some of these issues and make those vouchers more effective, because we think they're a great tool and we're really glad to have them. We just want to make sure that they're working the best that they can for the people that they're trying to serve.
And for people out there in the public who are saying, listen, I want to be an advocate, I want to help, I want to assist in the work that's being done, you're doing some great things, how can people go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that people can always reach out to their local elected officials and let them know that this is an issue that they care about. We have a number of different campaigns going that people can get involved with. They can always visit our website or email us at advocacy@urbanpathways.org if they want to know about some of the campaigns that we're working on and receive the talking points so that they can advocate alongside us.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about the homeless crisis in New York City, a lot of challenges, and some people feel as though things are getting a little bit worse given the fact that we've got this moratorium that's ended and COVID and the like. Before we go, give me a little bit of your insight as to how you see things presently.
It certainly is a challenge. It sometimes feels like a very difficult problem to solve, but we know what works. Again, the homelessness crisis is an affordable housing crisis. So the more affordable housing and access to subsidized housing that we can create in our city, the better off we will all be to moving people out of the system. And we also know that there are really good services that can get people into that first step. So, we're really glad to see the emphasis on opening more safe havens. We think that's a really great alternative to traditional shelter that is more accessible to folks. So, we are working hard. There are many organizations that are working hard to serve the homeless community, and we're certainly not stopping. So folks out there should know that.
Nicole, McVinua, thank you so much for being with us and continue the good work. And we appreciate the services that are being provided to our community. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All righty. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We do want you to stay with us. We'll continue with more here on the Social Justice Forums.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
And welcome back to the show. Inner City Green Team is a not-for-profit organization that is environmental and focused on poverty alleviation as well as community development. Their team is creating a sustainable, scalable, and replicable recycling infrastructure at New York City Housing Authority, along with job creation and environmental protection at its very core. Now, joining us and sharing more, we've got the co-founders of Inner City Green Team, Brigitte Vicenty, and then also John Johnson. And welcome both to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll do ladies first. And Brigitte, give me a little bit about this, because I know that when we talk about the work that you're doing, really, a heavy focus on environmental justice and and also poverty alleviation.
Yeah, this is about focusing on the underserved communities that has not been given priority to address environmental issues. And it was situation to how we became when after many years I had been putting my recyclables in the bin when a kid that was sitting on the bins said, I don't know why you keep putting recyclables in there. They don't collect them. They put them in the trash. And I, through my bamboozlement and frustration and just utter wonderment as to why this was, and was he really telling me the truth, until I actually literally saw my recyclables in the black garbage bag that was taken out of the bin. I needed answers. And this is how Inner City Green Team became. It wasn't Inner City Green Team at that point, but I needed answers at that point.
Yeah. And John, take us through a little bit. You work with NYCHA, and when we work with NYCHA, we know that can be sometimes a challenge to really get people to be responsible in the area of going green and recycling, but yet and still your organization has really done a great job of getting NYCHA to be an effective partner in helping you to do this.
Well, Daren, I mean, just to give you a breakdown about NYCHA, NYCHA is the largest public housing authority in the country. Over 500,000 people call NYCHA home. 1 in 14 New Yorkers are NYCHA residents. And if NYCHA were a city on its own, it would be the 32nd largest city, about the size of Miami or Atlanta. And just to kind of back up a little regarding NYCHA and NYCHA residents not recycling. In fact, the Inner City Green Team had to file a lawsuit to pressure NYCHA to come into compliance with New York City's 1989 law requiring all apartment buildings, or all New Yorkers in that matter, to recycle. So NYCHA's been behind the ball pretty much for 30 years, really not educating and empowering residents to really participate in the sustainability of New York City or the planet as a whole. What we've done, as Brigitte mentioned, she was a resident or is a resident and has been working to kind of look at these issues and try to make a difference. And we came together some 11 years ago to really focus on this issue and developed a very innovative and sort of responsive program that to the needs of NYCHA residents. It's a door-to-door program by which we go collect at each door. And it makes a lot of sense for the community. And Brigitte probably can tell you a little more about that as we move forward in this interview.
Yeah, I mean, talk about go to door to door. Let's talk about that for a minute, Brigitte. What was that like for you, being able to go door to door, particularly when we know that sometimes people aren't so friendly?
Yeah, tell me about it. Yes, the concept came from many years ago when I was doing some distribution with the NYCHA journals, and we were actually going around the city distributing the NYCHA journals door to door in different developments throughout the city. So that's where the idea came from. It's like, well, we can recycle door to door, but it wasn't as challenging as you would think. And I think the secret sauce was that I was a resident, and coming to my fellow neighbors to address my concern and to get them to do this, they were a whole lot more receptive. I mean, there's been people that just don't want to do it, but as far as residents receiving the message, they are very open to it, open to the information. And like I say, just because I live there too.
Right. And John, what would you say for yourself would be that secret sauce when we talk about educating NYCHA residents who, sometimes, we're talking about New Yorkers, first of all, right? They got their own agenda, we're moving, we're doing this right. So recycling can sometimes be the last thing on the list, but how are you able to capture the hearts and minds of people and say, listen, this is something we need to do?
Well, that's just it. I mean, one, NYCHA has been pretty much left off the table regarding sustainability in New York City for over 30 years. Like I said, when it comes to recycling, no outreach, no education, no real, energy that the city put into really bringing NYCHA up to speed with respect to how to do this. And this innovative program is saying, look, how do we create a program that actually works for residents? NYCHA tried a program called NYCHA Recycles. They put bins outside within clusters of development. They were few and far in between. It's very inconvenient for residents to bring down their recyclables from, the building, take elevators, walk across campus. So it really was a real big disincentive for folks to actually participate. But our program really brings it to where they are, right at their doorstep, at the front of their door. They put their recyclables out once a week. We collect each Friday. We're operating at the Wagner houses. And every time they recycle, they get points. And those points they can accumulate for various prizes and raffles that we engage residents in as an incentive. So that really sort of encourages folks to get involved. But I think more importantly, one of the things that we do to engage residents is our, what we call the Real Deal. That's REAL, that's the Resident Environmental Action Leaders Program. That's to train residents to really empower other residents through connecting with them by going door to door, doing outreach at events, or just being your neighbor. That really sort of helps this program go organically and comes in with this kind of idea like, a neighbor's telling you this about this and how important it is. And just really sharing that message of sustainability that most residents never had access to at NYCHA, or the opportunity to participate in a program like recycling and sort of understanding their role in it. Just to give you a quick statistic, over 133 million pounds of recyclables are going to landfill unnecessarily each year. And that, again, these landfills are far off as South Carolina, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, where our waste is transported. And that 133 million pounds of recyclables can be diverted back into a productive recycling stream and reused and save the city money, as well as, cut New York City's carbon footprint. So, when residents hear about this, that empowers them to say, you can make a difference. How do you impact climate change? How can you cut methane emissions? How can you help save trees? And residents say, I can do this with this simple action just by recycling out my door.
Yeah. Brigitte, for you, I mean, obviously a passion, and I understand that this is something that really got instilled from you through your mom.
Yeah, oh, Bleak and May. She was a force. She was a force, sometimes forceful. And, coming up, watching her move people and move minds and move hearts, as I matured, watching her do this, I wanted to have that same effect on people, but I just didn't know what. I knew I wanted to serve, but I couldn't call it. And I asked the universe, I was like, send me my calling. And I didn't know when it was going to happen, but when it did happen, I heard it. So my mother is just a shining example of, a community activist, and she definitely lives through me.
Yeah. And John, for yourself, I mean, what's the motivation for you that really, or the thing that got into you to say, listen, I want to take it and really help people to understand about living a green, safe life?
Well, I was a recycling outreach coordinator for Grow NYC's Office of Recycling Outreach and Education for over 10 years. And our mission was to work to improve residential recycling rates. In fact, that was one of the reasons why I was on your show some years ago, to sort of educate New Yorkers about the basics of recycling. And what I like to call the meeting between Brigitte and I, it's the woman with a vision and the man on a mission. My job was out there to really figure out ways to improve the environment. And the one simple way that I thought everybody could get involved was basically through recycling, right? It's the simplest way to do it. I mean, we live in New York City. There's no pristine forest that we can, go and chain ourselves to from preventing loggers from chopping it down. But what can folks do to really help improve the environment? And it's a simple, basic thing that they can do right at their home. And we make it the most convenient as possible by coming to your door, as we like to call it, a white glove concierge service. And, this coming together, Brigitte, with a vision, and my, out there beating the streets with a mission and figuring out how can we come together and operationalize this big idea. And that's what really sort of led us to the Inner City Green Team and where we are today. So, we've been on this journey again for about 11 years now. And it's led us to the point where we are now, where we actually are operating in a development and with hopes of expanding throughout NYCHA's entire inventory of over 300 developments citywide.
Yeah. Brigitte, for you, since starting this work and taking it on, talk to me about the impact that you feel that you've been able to make since doing this.
Being able to just reach out to residents who normally would not have a way to reduce their carbon footprint, and giving them a solution to be able to do that. It's just impactful in that way, and just making it easy for them, not making it complicated. Everybody's busy with their lives, and just being able to assist them in helping in our environment has been wonderfully impacted. The residents are engaged, and we've collected tons of recycling. Initially, when we were out in Brownsville 5 years ago, we collected over 18 tons. And it's just, a sign that they want to do this. Residents of New York City housing want to do this, as opposed to the rhetoric that was put out that they don't want to do it. But you have to, they have to have assistance in doing this. The information needs to be out there. So that's what Inner City Green Team is. We have the structure, we have the information in order to create this wonderful program that can get NYCHA's recycling numbers up.
And John, for people who want to get connected to you and the work that you do, how do they go about doing that?
We are on Instagram, we are on Twitter, we are on Facebook. On Twitter, it's at ICGT Works. And on Instagram, we're at innercity_green team. And on Facebook, facebook.com/innercitygreen team.
And for John, same question goes to you.
Well, one of the things I'd like to leave you with, Daren, is the fact that we have this sort of underlying theme as part of our programming. It's called BEAM, BEAM. That's Black and Brown Environmental Action Matters. If we look at NYCHA as a whole, of over 500,000 people, the impact that residents can have on the environment as a community. And to say that, dispel the myth that NYCHA residents don't care about issues like this, they have more on their plate, that's totally false. We see it every day. We see it in the people that we engage with on a regular basis. We see the fact that we can actually hire folks from the local community and really making a difference in people's lives. But also saying you can actually, as a community, make a difference. If we can move 133 million pounds from the landfills to the recycling facilities, that's taking off millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars that we have to pay just to export our waste to landfills, which is totally about $450 million a year now just to export our waste to landfills. How can we remove that material, not only our recyclables, but the organics, and show people that you have power? That's like taking 200,000 cars off the road every year if NYCHA recycled, right? That's a big difference in terms of what we as a community, as Black and Brown people, can participate in this program, and to show that we do care and that we do have some power and we can make a difference. And I think one thing that Brigitte left off, if you really want to reach out to us as well, is our website. I believe innercitygreenteam.org is where they can find us.
Yeah. Well, John, Brigitte, I want to thank you both for coming and sharing. I think it's a lot of great work that is going on in our community in terms of environmental impact. You're doing that. And Brigitte, shout out as somebody who grew up in NYCHA projects, St. Nick projects in Harlem. I'm very familiar of what it is to live and have a more, productive and healthy environment. And thank you for doing what you do. And
Thank you. Also, I'd like to add, we have a crowdfunding campaign. It's our waste prevention program called the One Stop Drop Eco Environmental Center, and it's sponsored through IOB, and the link is ioby.com/ICGT, where we are raising funds to create our One Stop Drop Environmental Center.
Well, thank you both for being with us. There you got the crowdfunding information, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you
Derek.
so much, Daren.
Thank
Pleasure.
you. Thank you. Well, want to let our viewers know that we come to the end of our show today. Want to thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice Forum. Now, if you want to rewatch the cable cast, you can watch it right here on BronxNet's channel 67. And then also you can present your points of view and visit our social media pages at BronxNet TV. We encourage you to come back and join us next week where we continue to elevate the conversation, have some more informative guests, and bring you the issues that matter the most here on the Social Justice Forums. I'm Daren Jaime. Until next time we meet, saying take care and God bless.